Hi, friends. All right, I'm back. I'm reading the second book. This is The Pipeline. The Fight Lives On. Again, all three books are combined here in this one. So we finished the first one, The Pipeline, A New Hope. I think it was called something like that, but it's like Star Wars. This is sort of the Empire Strikes Back. You know, in the first book, they kind of won. They kind of won against Global Water Corp, and now they're facing a new problem. So let's see. So this is chapter 1 of the second book, The Fight Lives On. Chapter 1, The Problem. Over the past few months, there has been problem after problem on the pipeline. The nature of this problem isn't hurricanes, floods, government funding, sabotage, smear campaigns, mega corporations, or the betrayal of her first and only love. Amy wishes she could go back to those days. It was a simpler time. No, this problem was man made and continues to be made every day. Millions of tons of it. The problem is plastic pollution to be exact. Tons of it going into the pipeline and causing clogs. Costly and time consuming clogs. So far, they have been able to fix them before any problems have happened, but it's caused delay after delay. Amy had no idea how to deal with it. At the moment, her head foreman, Sal, was working on yet another clog. They were in New Jersey. They were digging up an area of pipe and trying to find the clog. This took time and manpower that they could not afford to lose. The clogs were usually near joints in the pipe or the directional valves. These valves were used to direct the water to specific areas, so the team had some idea where to start pulling the pipe. But if this keeps up, they will never finish the project. They tried placing screens over the front of the openings to keep large pieces of plastic from entering those pipes, but those got clogged up at the source, and they had to dedicate a crew of workers to keep those clear, which was a dangerous job. They moved tons of plastic each month at each location, and enough was still getting through to be a problem. It did not escape Amy's attention that she would not have to fight one corporation this time. She would have to fight them all. That's the end of chapter 1. It was a short chapter, so we're just going to move on to chapter 2, The Albatross. The Albatross. Across the world on a remote island northwest of Tasmania, northwest of Tasmania, Mara sat crying. She was holding a 1-week-old baby albatross in her arms. This amazing creature had hatched 1 week ago. It was born perfectly healthy, and now it was dead. Mara was visiting the island with a colleague. She was invited to come and witness what was happening there. This once safe and secluded nesting ground had become a horror scene. People, this is all true. This is all true information. This is not fiction, so you can look it up. The team would perform an autopsy on the chick, but they already knew what they would find. These babies were dying by the hundreds. The autopsy would reveal tiny pieces of plastic in the chick's belly. It was unable to digest it, and it was unable to eat anything else because its stomach was full. The adult albatrosses were unaware that the food they thought they were bringing to their babies was actually killing them. Mara was sick. She looked around with teary eyes at what was happening. She looked for a solution, but there wasn't one. The team veterinarian would gently take the living chicks and carefully flush out their stomachs with water. These chicks would regurgitate dozens, sometimes hundreds of pieces of plastic. The team would then feed the chicks with a nutritious slurry blend of fish and other vitamins that the babies would need to recover from malnourishment. They had a small team of 6 men and women and thousands of baby chicks. The one Mara held in her arms wouldn't get the care it needed to survive. Neither would hundreds more. Mara cried for the little baby that she held in her arms. But her tears weren't just for that little baby. They were for her own little baby. Mara had only found out that she was pregnant 2 days before this trip. She hadn't even told Ben yet. She feared he wouldn't want her to go on the trip. Now she wished she hadn't gone. She thought she would do something here to help the planet, her child's future. Now she wondered what the future would be like for her baby and what the future held. At that moment, she felt hopeless, more than hopeless, more hopeless than she had ever felt before. Chapter 3, Ainsley Wallace. We're only 5 minutes in. We can do another chapter. All right. That chapter was sad. This chapter is not as sad. Chapter 3, Dr. Ainsley Wallace. You're going to like him. Deep in the frigid Arctic Ocean, Dr. Wallace and his team are searching desperately for a baby seal that they had been informed of. A fishing crew reported seeing an injured baby seal on a piece of shoreline and gave them an approximate location. The brave team endured harsh winds and cold temperatures, but would not give up until they found it. There, one of the team shouted. The team made land and departed the boat. All alone on freezing, ragged piece of shoreline was this tiny baby, maybe 2 months old. Its mother had abandoned it. These animals form close family bonds. They love and protect their cubs. Ainsley couldn't help but wonder about the mother's anguish of having to leave her baby there to die. The cub had a piece of rope tangled around its flipper. The baby must have struggled because the rope had cut deeply into the cub's flesh. It was a terrible wound. They cut the rope and freed the baby from it. They placed the cub in the boat and rushed it back to their facility. They were several freezing hours away. Once back at the facility, they administered what they could to help the baby. They gave it fluids, antibiotics, and pain medicine. All they could do now was wait. Ainsley went back to his bunk. They were staying in a station in the Arctic. They studied how plastic pollution and fishing equipment affected sea life in the Arctic. As he lay in his bunk, his thoughts wandered back and forth between the mother's pain of watching her cub suffer and how much the cub itself had suffered. The poor thing must have been in tremendous pain. Then his thoughts went to how futile it all seemed. They couldn't do much to make a difference. How many more were out there right now suffering? What could be done to stop it? Could there be anything? He finally drifted into a restless sleep. In the morning, he went to check on the baby seal cub. He hung his head. They were too late. They couldn't even help this one. A week earlier, they had been out collecting some pieces of plastic in the ocean. They found a large, thick sheet floating near the surface. This was precisely what they were looking for. One of their missions was to discover why so many fish were disappearing. The problem seemed more significant than could be solely caused by overfishing. When they collected this plastic sheet, it was just what they expected. It had a slimy film on it. This type of film wasn't common in freezing waters of the Arctic. They returned the sheet to the lab and ran some tests on the slime. The next day, he made his way to the lab to see what the results were from the slime. The slime carried a bacterial virus. The virus would grow on the plastic, float worldwide, and spread to different fish species, maybe even to the coral and plants. More research would need to be done to determine how much damage was being caused. They determined that the surface of the plastic combined with the seawater and sunlight was an ideal environment for these toxic bacteria to grow. It was a green algae, and many animals would munch on it or eat the plastic entirely, mistaking it for food. He was staggered by the enormity of the possible catastrophe. They would spend another week at the outpost and then head to the U.S. to review their findings. He wouldn't have anything good to report. Between climate change, overfishing, plastic pollution, fishing, and fishing nets in the ocean, there seemed to be no hope for the future of the Arctic fish and animals. So that's all true. It's not all using the scientific terms and blah, 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 blah. And some scientists out there might say that's not exactly true. The premise of it is exactly true. And if you don't believe me, you can watch, I note the book, the article in here, Oceans, it'll be in here. So yeah, there's documentaries, they're true. You can watch it. It's the truth. Anyway, I'm going to stop here. I'm going to go to chapter 4 in the next video.